everybody, my name is Victoria. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about all the books that I read in the month of June. I very ambitiously set out to read 10 or 11 books. I think I put that many books on my June TBR, and that was obviously not attainable for me. I read 5.5 books, so just barely got halfway to my goal, but that's okay. Most of what I read I really enjoyed. Let's go ahead and talk about the books. If you've been keeping up with my channel a little bit, you've definitely heard me talk about The Way of Kings, and now we are about halfway through. I'm one of the co-hosts for a Stormlight Archives read-along that's happening. Info will be linked down below for that. I have been tabbing this book, as you can see, in a sort of involved way. I already need to order some more tabs halfway through. I'm not going to make it to the end of this book without ordering some more tabs. So I'm enjoying that process though, even though it looks kind of crazy, but I kind of like doing it more because it's slowing me down a little bit and making me read really closely and not skim over anything. So for that reason, I'm going to keep going with it, although it is a much slower process. If I even attempt to give you a plot summary of this book, I'm going to fail miserably, so I'm not going to do that today, but I do want you to know that I'm really enjoying this. It's such a complex world. I'm loving it in all of its intricacy and complexities. It has such a different feel than the other Brandon Sanderson that I've read so far. I've read the 2 books in the Skyward series, and then I'm currently in the middle of the last book of Mistborn. So being able to compare, especially Mistborn, with this book, and I told this to my buddy Lezlie over at the Nerdy Narrative, but to me so far, Mistborn feels more like an addictive TV show, and Stormlight Archives feels a little bit more like an epic, award-winning cinematic movie if I was going to compare the vibes of those series. So because I'm reading them kind of side by side right now, it's been interesting to compare the style, and the style is just so very fundamentally different from series to series and from book to book. So I really love that Sanderson is able to do that. We will be finishing this book in the month of July, and I have the best intentions of filming a separate book review for this book, so you can look forward to that. Next up, I finished the 6th book of the Anne of Green Gables series. This is Anne of Ingleside, and I seem to be a little bit in the minority of my fellow read-along friends. I really liked this one. I know a lot of people found this to be not their favorite. In fact, a lot of people have said this is their least favorite in the series so far. I enjoyed this one because I personally liked that we followed Anne's children a lot. I enjoyed their antics and their humor, and Montgomery is just so witty in the way she writes about them, and she's very insightful into what a child would be thinking and how a child justifies their actions. I also really enjoyed the themes of the inevitability of change. Also, there's a big theme of just being grateful for where you are in life and being grateful for what you have. There were a couple things that were very strange and a little bit out of character, I felt. One of them being that there's a point in the book when Anne expresses quite a bit of judgment against a family who's in a different socioeconomic class than she is, and that was very strange. I didn't feel like Anne would really do that. It seemed very out of character for her to be kind of judgy. And also, there's a lot of expressions of women needing to be skinny to be beautiful, women fearing gaining weight and losing worth when they gain weight. So that was definitely very problematic in this book, and I did not enjoy seeing those things, but I can see how it is very reflective of the attitudes of the time, and I would assume that Montgomery herself probably held some of these attitudes because it would be pretty hard not to, I think, in the time that this was written. So putting those 2 things aside, the rest of the book I had a great time with, and I even maybe liked it a little bit more than the 2 preceding. So I'm giving this 4.5 stars. It's not a 5-star because I do think there was some elements to be desired in it, and I did not enjoy seeing Anne be judgmental of other people. But this book retains its sweetness in the way that's consistent with the rest of the series, and so I still liked it a lot. Next up, we have I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This book was a super fun reading experience because I read it for the I Capture the Castle read-along hosted by Angie, Tia, Amanda, and Rainey, and I thought they did a wonderful job of creating really fun challenges. There was a bingo card. I kind of went all out and I did a lot of the bingo challenges, so that was really fun. I just loved reading it alongside them and getting to talk about it a little bit as we were reading it. When I first started reading this book, I thought for sure it was going to be a 5-star book. The ending left some things to be desired, and so I ended up giving this 4 stars, but I love the voice of Cassandra in this book. In this book, we follow 17-year-old Cassandra, and she lives in this old rundown English castle with her father and her sister and her stepmom, and they don't really have a lot of money. They are very destitute. Her dad is a fairly famous writer, and he had some success with a book, and he rode that success for a long time, but he hasn't written anything else in a very long time, and so they are very poor, and they're just kind of trying to get by. There's also another character. He's sort of a helper around the castle. He's sort of a servant hand, and that character actually also helps them financially to get by. Cassandra as a protagonist is a really great mixture of insightfulness and cleverness and wit, but at the same time she's also very much a teenager, and you see that naive side of her. She definitely has certain ideas about the world that do point to her being naive and young and inexperienced. This book is classified as a modern classic and also as a coming of age novel, and by the end of the book we really do get to see Cassandra grow and change, and she has to make some hard adult decisions. I liked this book because it did have a really realistic resolution of the plot. However, I do wish we got a little bit more information. I do wish we saw a happier ending for some of our characters. I almost wish this book had a sequel so that we could continue following the characters, because you do really get to appreciate them and love them. Overall, this was a wonderful read, and I gave it 4 stars. I'm very excited to say that I did finish my reread of The Lord of the Rings, and so I finished The Return of the King. I buddy read this with Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf. I actually did a whole video talking about Lord of the Rings and doing a little bit of a deep dive into J.R.R. Tolkien's life, so I'll link that in case you're interested in that video. This reread experience was everything that I ever wanted it to be, and I just had such a great time being back in Middle Earth. This last book had some things that I had forgotten about, particularly the way it ends and versus how the movie ends. They end in kind of different places, and there's some extraneous things that happen that are obviously left out of the movies for good reason, and I had forgotten about some of those extraneous things. So that was very interesting on this reread to remember those strange elements of the story that I had just completely forgotten. It's a classic. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I'm so glad that I reread these, and I look forward to when I get to reread them again. The Lord of the Rings will forever have a very special place in my heart. 5 stars if you couldn't guess already. Next up, I finally got to a nonfiction book. I've not been really reading nonfiction very much at all this year, and so I read The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. I had this for quite some time, quite a few years now, and had not gotten to it. So I'm really glad that I'm getting to read through my owned TBR a little bit more. But The Hiding Place is about Corrie ten Boom, and I initially thought it was written by Corrie ten Boom, but I guess it's actually written by a couple of other authors in collaboration with Corrie ten Boom, and I can't remember who those authors are right now. But it does have her name on the cover, so oh, there it is. John and Elizabeth Sherrill. So they helped her write this, I think, and they helped recount her life and then made it into a more like linear story. Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch woman living in Holland during World War II, and she becomes part of this underground network of hiding the Jews from the Nazis. And so they had a place in their house right next to her bedroom. They built this brick wall into her bedroom, and then they were hiding Jewish people in her room. This book, as you would probably assume, is very sad and tragic. It's such an incredible true story that I think everybody should read and know about. You definitely should pick this up. I can't give this enough stars. If I could give it 1,000,000 stars, I would. This was a wonderful book. Something you also want to know going into this book before you pick it up is that Corrie ten Boom was a very religious woman, and there's a lot of talk in here about God and Jesus and the kind of divine intervention in her life while she was working against the government and against the Nazis. I really gleaned so much from this book. It's one I will definitely revisit throughout my life, I'm sure. I'm very much looking forward to the next time that I can reread this one. And then finally, I finished the month off with The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I read this for the Summer of Contemporary Readathon. It was the group book for the Readathon, and that was hosted by Angie from Literary Labors and Laura Pora, and oh, I'm sorry, I should have looked up the rest of the names. I'll link them down below. I'll link all the booktubers that I mentioned today down below. Unfortunately, I didn't like this one very much at all. It wasn't horrible. From an entertainment perspective, it was an entertaining, fast read. I really liked the short chapters, and the pacing of this book I thought was really good. It jumps between multiple perspectives, and you get to see into a lot of people's heads. Even some random side characters you get to see into their heads, and I really enjoyed that part of this book. However, this book kind of presents a worldview that I fundamentally disagree with. I'll start off by saying this. I like romance books in general if they're done really well. This one is definitely an insta-love book. It's a love at first sight kind of book, and that already I don't really get on board with very often. Maybe if it's done super well. But we are led to believe that this whole book takes place in the course of a day. And so you can see how we have some problems with that. We have these teenagers that fall in love over the course of a day, and they're meant to be over the course of a day. That doesn't happen in real life. It just doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it happened to you. You can yell at me in the comments. No, please don't yell at me. I don't like getting yelled at. But to me, the premise of that is highly not likely. But even more concerning in this book is not even the insta-love. My main problem of this book is the whole follow your heart and everything will be okay. That's just not how life works, and I don't think it's a good message to give to young adults. There's a part of this book that even asks the question, is cheating okay if it's following your heart? And the author doesn't really give you a black or white answer, and to me there's a black and white answer to that question. The main issue that I have with this book is that it promotes the idea that you should follow your heart no matter what, and that your heart will guide you. And I'm sorry, but that's just not how life works. Do not listen to your heart. Our hearts will lead us in the wrong direction a lot. And so to me, fundamentally, that's just not a message that I want to tell young people. I would never want to tell a young person, hey, follow your heart. It doesn't matter who you hurt. Just do you. That's such a selfish way of living, and I didn't like that this book kind of promotes that idea. Sorry to end this video on a little bit of a negative note, but I wouldn't recommend this book. I gave it 2 stars, and I wouldn't want to put it in the hands of any young adults in my own life. Those are all the books that I read in the month of June. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, if you have any opinions on these books as well. I'd love to hear them. I hope you're having a good summer so far. I hope you're staying cool out there. It's been 105 degrees where I live pretty much every day this week so far. So we are definitely full-fledged into summer. Keep reading great books, and until next time, bye-bye.